Good morning and welcome to the first panel around what we need to do to move towards a truly decentralised grid run on distributed energy resources. We've got a wide-ranging panel with multiple views and interested parties, so I'm looking forward to a very sort of proactive and interested discussion. So first is an introduction as to why it's the importance of moving towards a decentralised grid. And I think it's fundamentally, it's about that link to the net zero target and the support of the growth of renewables. I think what we've seen is big changes and we are definitely moving in the right direction. And I think 2020 has certainly accelerated that move towards that, and more on that in a second. But before we sort of dive into our topic, I propose a quick introduction for the various different panelists, and we'll kick off with the discussion. So I'll start with Madeleine, and we'll sort of move on through. I'll give a quick intro to Kiwi and why we're interested in this at the end, and then we'll kick off with some discussion points. Madeleine?
Great, thanks Tom, and thanks for having me here. I'm Madeleine Greenhalgh. I'm the policy lead for Regen and the electricity storage network. So I'll probably be talking in more of a storage capacity today, because that's my main interest. But yeah, really excited to talk through this discussion and understand what a flexible system means for a net zero future, particularly off the back of the announcements we've had from the government in the last few weeks.
Great. John, do you want to give a quick introduction for National Grid?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm John Twomey from National Grid ESO, so I'm head of market development for the ESO. So the role of my team is to look at the longer term strategic work that we need to do across markets. I'm here today to kind of talk around what 2020s look like from an ESO point of view, and also to talk around how some of our reforms are shaping up as we go into 2021.
Right, thank you very much. I'll pass across to Steve.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so Stephen Meersman, one of the directors of Zenobe Energy. We will look at this from two perspectives, really. One, from our fleet of large-scale batteries, and secondly, from the perspective of the fleet of electric bus depots that we run across the country, which is as much a user as a contributor, hopefully, to the net zero and a wider distributed energy system.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Hugh, if you want to give a quick intro as well.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, Hugh Brennan, Hive Energy. We're a solar developer. If I could get out of the car and show you, I'm visiting our first subsidy-free solar site that we're building up near Rugby today. And so obviously we're very interested to see how a site where we have already connected the grid can end up playing a role when we look to add energy storage down, sooner or down the road too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And then just finally on sort of why Kiwi is so interested in this sort of move to a flexible, decentralized network. So we are a global power point. We provide a global power plant solution. So our vision is to simplify distributed energy resources for a global sustainability impact. So what does all this mean with regards to interest? What we're looking to do is we're using our Kiwi core platform, and we're helping distributed energy resources, so all that decentralized energy out there, achieve their potential by simplifying market participation. So what does that mean? That means what we want to do is we want to grow the amount of megawatts that's available to National Grid, and John, for the sake of this conversation now, by accessing and using our platform to access the various different markets and availability of the programs that are available through National Grid. So on that particular point, and without sort of dropping John into it too early, I think 2020 has been a fascinating year for multiple reasons, and I think maybe slightly lost in the sort of background has been the big changes that this has caused from a national grid point of view. I was just wondering, John, if you could just talk us through some of the challenges that grid have experienced through 2020, and perhaps how that is how we are beginning to move towards that decentralized network as a result of some of those challenges.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. So yeah, I'll just say a couple of minutes around what 2020s look like from the ESO point of view. I think we can all check in with the fact that 2020 has been a very unique year not only from a kind of personal point of view, but equally for business operations. What 2020's really done is it's given us a glimpse of the future. That's probably the first thing I would say. So what have we seen? Well, we've seen demand suppressions up to 20% in general. That's a huge change on what we would normally kind of forecast and the operational limits that we've seen in high historical years. So that's been one big driver. Equally, with that demand suppression, we've equally seen at times of the year, particularly like during that springtime, that there's high penetration of decentralized energy coming onto the system, particularly high amounts of renewables, particularly over windy and sunny weekends and bank holidays. We've seen some settlement periods where you've had 100% renewables, and that in essence has given us, you know, a real kind of live scenario for how we kind of see a net zero system shaping up. I think equally what it's done is it's highlighted the actions that the ESO has had to take to kind of manage the operability of the system. So in many cases, we've had low inertia on the system, which has meant that we've had to curtail some renewables off the system and equally put some carbon intensive plant on the system. So those actions can kind of correlate to around 20% of the movement within the market. One of the big things that we've seen throughout the course of 2020 is the fact that we introduced a new ancillary service, so ODFM product, so a system flexibility product, which in essence is targeted at smaller decentralized assets connected on a whole system basis. We signed up around 4 gigawatts of assets, which in essence provides us with a service where we can kind of turn down generation as and when we need it. That's been really successful, but it's also been put in place in really quick timescales, probably timescales that I imagine market participants haven't felt favourable, and equally from the ESO point of view, we haven't felt comfortable. So that's something that we feel that we need to take forward and we need to look at going through the course of 2021. So all in all, it's given us a real sort of clear indication of what the future looks like, but it has, if you like, given us a lot of focus on the amount of transition and work that's needed, particularly on the ancillary services market, to make sure that those markets operate as we expect, and equally the ESO becomes a residual balance when it's not taking majority of actions in real time.
Right, thank you very much for that, John. I'd like to get Steve, your view on that, particularly around sort of like the demand suppression side of things. I know that sort of Zenobe's huge on the energy storage side of things, and I'd be keen to get your view as to sort of those changes and the impact that it's sort of you've seen from Zenobe's side.
I think it's incredibly positive. I mean, frankly, I think John's underplaying the massive achievement that the ESO has achieved there. I mean, frankly, launching a service in that record time is brilliant, and I think the reason it worked so well is they were very open with the industry about what they were looking to do, what they think they might not get right the first time, and create an open dialogue. And I think that's what worked really well. So looking forward to seeing more of that in the future. And it's almost sort of bringing that way of software and tech companies work sort of approach to market management. Obviously, resilience is key, but sort of getting something out there, a minimum product that works, and then refining it as it goes along with this sort of 6-month trial period. And I think we've seen two things there. One is people really welcome that in the industry, the opportunity to enter into that dialogue. And secondly, a massive uptake in the market in terms of participating in that service. So I think that's going to be really positive as we learn the lessons from the COVID period in terms of effectively getting that flash forward of what our energy system will look like 4 or 5 years from now.
I just on that point that Steve made there, I'd just like to echo what I thought a huge positive the ODFM work was. We Kiwi were involved in that, and I thought the speed with which you rolled it out was brilliant. And you know, like the learnings as we went along was absolutely superb. So from a personal point of view, I actually see that as a huge positive. I thought that really showed that we were moving in the right direction. So I found that to be very, very exciting. Hugh, I'd just like to get your sort of viewpoint on the operability of the system. As John mentioned, various different assets were being curtailed as we sort of tried to manage as the system tried to be managed. Obviously, Hive, huge in solar side of things, and I was keen to get your view on that side of things.
Tom, it's a very interesting point. I mean, we're kind of our role will only, the role of solar parks in this will only get bigger, the role of sort of reactive power and voltage control and all of that. So we're moving from solar plants having on-off switches to solar plants actually being part of the solution and doing this. But I suppose, I think for all involved, and John touches on it there, the window into the future that we got through this year is really helpful, because this will be a balancing act between moving to a greener grid, but also dealing with uncertain timing on when events happen, like everyone suddenly deciding to buy an electric car, and a balancing between committing resources versus protecting the public purse, but still because this is DERs can be green or not green. They still there's two separate discussions here, and moving to a distributed demand and supply operation is part of what we're doing, along with, and we'll talk about that, DSOs, but part of that is moving along with the greenification of everything.
I can completely agree, and I think that from that point of view, it's about taking advantage of the flexibility that sits inherently within the network to move towards that green network, and sort of away from the sort of that centralized reliance that we have at the moment. Madeleine, I'd be interested to just get your view on the sort of policy support and sort of the policy impacts as we move towards this this future of a sort of a decentralized network, and sort of like the fast rollout of policy, sort of programs such as ODFM. I mean, what it was from your point of view, sort of the policy impact of that from your point of view.
I think, yeah, just to say the speed, like you say, at which it happened, ODFM, and also the storage from reserve trial that Arenco proposed and that's being brought forward, we definitely welcome the speed at which they were done. So I think from a policy perspective, sometimes it can take quite a while to think through the implications of a different service on a system, and creating those markets and those policies to welcome flexible assets can take some time, and it should be well thought through. But I think we really welcomed, we saw in April the speed at which the ESO can react. We can do these things really quickly. Let's make sure we take that and use it again in the future. And I completely appreciate John's point about we must step back now and have a look at how those new markets ran, how those new services ran. But I think from a policy perspective, we really need to see what's coming next. So how are those exciting, good things that we saw over the COVID period, how are we going to use those? How are we going to learn from that? How are we going to build that into the system over the next few months?
So without throwing you under, well, I was going to say the bus, but I'll say the electric bus for Steve's sake. You've talked about the sort of the future. You've talked about 20. Like how do we build on these sort of advances that we've made as we move into 2021 from a policy point of view? How do we develop these markets? How do we make sure that we continue to move in that right direction and sort of more towards this flexible, decentralized work?
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is net zero flexibility, decarbonised flexibility. We talk about decarbonised generation a lot, and we're on a really good path for that, but we don't talk about decarbonised flexibility enough, I don't think, and the value that should be recognised of decarbonised flexibility. I'm sure many people listening will roll their eyes at me going on about this again, because it's kind of one of the things I get on my soapbox about quite a lot. But we really need to recognise the value of the carbon the lack of carbon in certain flexible assets, and give them the step up that they need into the network in the same way that we might do with generation. For me, that's the next step to develop some of these markets and services we've seen coming out. How do we make sure that they are net zero?
So I guess it's probably a nice point to pass across to Steve when we're talking about decarbonised flexibility. I imagine you've probably got a couple of views on decarbonised flexibility that you might be interested to bring onto the conversation?
Well, I think there's lots of movement that's been happening, and I think that's really positive. And I think what we're also seeing is, again, as we come out of yet another lockdown, is that people are thinking about sustainability also for decarbonizing from a financial perspective, in terms of we're getting closer towards a point where it actually it's not just silly not looking at decarbonizing, but also financially silly from not looking at decarbonizing, which I think is positive. I do think there is more need for coordination, again, across the various participants in the industry and the regulators. And when I say regulators, I do mean plural, because we've got Ofgem, we've got other different government parts playing a role, and we see a lot of goodwill from everybody in their own silo, but I think more coordination could link the pieces up and make sure that the landscape becomes a bit easier to navigate. We see that a lot with our customers. That, I mean, at the risk of using that awful three-letter word and the TCR review, I'm not going to go on a soapbox, but a lot of people in the industry on the EV side don't understand yet what this means for them. And I think if they would be jumping on their soapbox and actually saying, well, hold on, dear government, you want us to invest in greener things. You want us to clean up air quality, but why are you messing us about with suddenly making all that more expensive? I mean, the cost for, say, a bus operator or a last mile delivery company with off-target charging could easily be one or two vehicles every 3 years for every depot, just purely disappearing in these charges. So there's a lot of things there where I think just having these debates or creating the forums for these debates would be beneficial if we're going to achieve what we want to achieve at the lowest possible cost. Sorry, I'll end my rant there.
No, I think it's raised some excellent points, and I'd like to pick the coordination point up with John, just around sort of like sort of how do we make sure that as an industry we're working together? We've got a great group here that's representative across the industry. How do we make sure that this is happening on a larger scale?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things from my perspective that probably spring to mind. The first one is just around how we kind of develop and implement new products. Like if we think about that more on a local level, I mean, the ESO's had like Power Responsive group that's been up and running for a while. I think we get a fair bit of feedback, and I think rightly so, about making sure that we are setting out the clear need for what we want, but actually not going too far with the design of what that is, and actually handing that kind of accountability over to industry to kind of step up and think about how they're best placed to decide how that kind of need can best be met with different flexibility solutions being provided in different locations across the country. So I think there's something in terms of how we work together as an industry and have the kind of right forums to do that. I think like probably on a broader policy level, we're probably coming into a phase where we're suddenly going to see the implementation of different types of market arrangements as well that need to be pinned together. So today, we broadly have ESO markets. By 2023, we will have the establishment of DSO markets. We will need to make sure that there is coordination, alignment between those two markets, because we don't want to be overcomplicated it. We also want to make sure that market providers, where possible, can stack services between those markets, and there's a system that kind of can cater for that. Doesn't say that it's going to be able to be done across all products, but that's what we should be aiming for. We should be aiming to kind of maximize the efficiency of every asset that's kind of being delivered across the country. So I think the DSO to ESO is going to be a really, really big one. And the third one for me is, I think, just from an ESO point of view, we're working really hard in terms of just how we can be transparent with our plans, how we can share as much data as we possibly can, and making sure that we've got the right forums for feedback. So we've got things going like the operational forums that happen on a weekly basis, which really are good in terms of us being able to kind of tell a story, but equally being able to understand like the mood music from industry in terms of the areas that we need to focus. So I think it's a combination of those three from my perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I'd just like to pick up the point around sort of accountability to industry, and I'd like to get Hugh's view on that point, just as a major sort of industry player, what's your view around that sort of accountability and that engagement with the industry? And do you feel like we're working together, and as we sort of move towards these sort of different market arrangements?
I think it's an incredibly good point, and I sort of look at some big macro things like car chargers, and if you're not Tesla, who say, what car should you buy? You should buy Tesla, and it's nothing to do with the car. Or you look at the clever things GridServe do, but you look on a national basis and you go, with all these risks, who's actually going to put in that network? So I think the more that you chat about and make sure these silos of work have the big picture is, that's all I do in my life, is trying to get everybody around seeing the overall project. But I think from our point of view, I think the fact that the UK in general doesn't, if you're putting in an energy storage system, it's around, what will the demand for that be, rather than having contracts like you would have in the US or South Korea to know exactly what it's going to do. So it's going to happen more gradually, and I think it's going to happen on a local level, like you say, as part of this DSO thing. And that's where I see us incrementally adding, in dialogue with whatever, WBE, UKPN, etc., other brands available. But I think on the macro level, the stuff that John's dealing with, that's a very specialized investment. That's a very specialized expertise, and I see that kind of largely continuing, because it's what we as an industry, we're simple folks, and we need to, I think it's more on the local level where you'll start seeing these energy storage things start to develop in dialogue with local DSOs.
Great, thank you. You touched on energy storage there again, and as we've got Madeleine and Steve on the call, I'd be keen to get their views on sort of particularly around. I know Steve, you've already mentioned the DCR, but also like the structure of the various different revenue streams that are available to energy storage, and supporting that change and that move to that decarbonisation.
I think one of the things there is data. I mean, I feel like it's extent repeating myself in different incarnations, I guess, but I mean, it's collaboration, which is effectively about sharing information and perspectives. But I think the other bit is just getting raw data. I think with a lot of the services, it's how are we going to be dispatched? What will be the requirements or the burdens this will place on our system? And I think with the some of the more standardized products, that's easier because you can look at past frequency data, et cetera, et cetera. But say for some of the tenders that are about now, I mean, again, great things of what the DNOs also and the DSOs are doing about localized tenders for helping alleviate burdens on substations, et cetera. But being able to communicate more data so that a developer or an owner operator can truly evaluate the cost or an opportunity or risk of participating in one service with another. I think that's something where we've come a long way, but we've still got a long way to go. And I think the second bit is the infamous, again, sort of a phrase that means a lot of different things to different people, revenue stacking. I mean, at the moment, I think people are still coming to terms with the fact that actually, if you want to be in the storage business or in the distributed energy business or flexibility, you're an independent power plant. You're not a solar farm. You need to constantly move around and optimize your asset by participating in different things. I think I still see people coming to terms with that. And I think the other bit is, again, to do that, you need information. So having the data and making that, I guess, on the regulatory and the procurement side, I guess, is how do you develop a product that sits neatly along these other things? It's not easy, but it is in everyone's interest, because in the end, the more flexibility or the more combinations of different services that the largest group of people can bid for, in the end, it'll drive down the cost for the end consumer, and that's what this whole thing is about. So I think, again, having an open dialogue about, why do we need to bid this in EFA blocks and that in 24-hour blocks and that in this every 5 minutes. I mean, there's all good reasons for that, but thinking holistically 2-3 years down the line, where do we want to be, and having that debate across the industry, and perhaps an even wider definition of what the industry is, I think would again accelerate this further. I don't know,
Yeah.
Madeleine, if you agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, no, I was just going to bring Madeleine in and get your view.
Yeah, if I can just respond to a couple of points that Stephen made there, and also some that John made earlier about this need for data and the need to have a good view of the system. You know, at the moment, I think it's probably quite well recognised that the ESO doesn't have a great view of what what's happening at the DSO level, and probably vice versa as well. So, you know, having the data available and the information to understand what's happening on the system, but also having that digital connected service so that we can actually see what's happening and then dispatch those assets in the time that we need to. You know, I don't want to look at cliches, but everyone talks about still needing a fax machine in order to get in touch with some parts of the control room. And I'm not going to put this all on the ESO, because the ESO is stuck with a really old, difficult system, and I don't blame anyone for that. It's just the nature of having to move from a massive piece of infrastructure from several decades worth of build up to now a very, very fast move into a much more real-time world of many, many hundreds and thousands of flexible assets. So it is really hard, but I think that's the crucial bit that's going to get us there. If we can't see, understand and dispatch these assets through the data and the digital technologies that we need to do that in real time, then we aren't going to manage this net zero system by 2025 or whenever it might hopefully be.
I just want to give John an opportunity to respond on those points. Particularly, I'm just interested in that sort of the data point and that talking between DSOs and the ESO.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that they're all really valid points. I think, you know, there's two things that come to mind. There's the fact that we need to put the right data out there, and I think we just need to put it out there. We need to make sure it's machine readable. We need to make sure that participants can pick it up and they can do how they choose with it. I think, you know, that's really important. And the second thing is we need to make sure there's alignment and consistency between the timing of when that data is released, because there's different sets of data that people need to make a judgment call. It's no benefit if they've just got one set of that data. So it does need to come together, I think, as a holistic plan. What I can kind of say on the data point is we're approaching our sort of Rio 2 regulatory new phase, which kicks in from 1st of April. So the timing of like the sort of outcome from Ofgem is forecast to happen before Christmas. But a big part of that offering is around doing more with data, building a data portal, stepping up to the plate to be able to release more coherent data out to the market in machine readable format. And the second point, which I think is equally, but maybe if not even more important, is the fact a lot of our plan over the next 2 years, 75% of the CapEx expenditure is all geared around IT investments, upgrades to control room. And in essence, to truly get to a decentralized energy system, what we do need is we need automation on dispatch capability, like across the board, and we need the right telecoms and information architecture to be in place to enable that to happen. So again, that's all being planned for, but it needs to happen. So I think kind of the plans are there, but next 2 years is a big one in terms of kind of seeing that through.
Great, thank you very much for that. So I'm conscious of the fact we've got 2 minutes left, so it's probably best to summarise and sort of wind up our conversation. My first thought is just on that point that John, you've made there around sort of IT investment and sort of getting to that world of decentralised automation, et cetera, and from a Kiwi point of view, as you can imagine, that's something that's extremely important to us as we simplify and sort of through the VPP, our Kiwi core platform, you know, we support and move you towards that automation as much as possible. And I say, you know, just to sort of summarize the various different points, I mean, sort of, John, you've talked about the coordination and the need for system stacking. Hugh, you touched on sort of breaking down the various different silos, and also sort of pointed to that sort of bottom-up local level activity that's going to play just as important part as that top-down part, you know, as we move towards the regulatory grid changes. Steve, you talked about the need for the costs to come down and for the important players in this to basically, sort of like a sort of move towards and sort of speak with her to the industry, particularly around that data point. And then Madeleine's really driven home the need for a coordinated structure, again, looking at that data and upgrading the infrastructure in real time. So hopefully that gives us sort of a quick summary of what I think are sort of the main points that people were looking to get across. I'm conscious of the time, so unless anyone has sort of any other major points they want to bring in, or unless I've misconstrued how they've in my summaries there, I think it just leaves me to thank you all very much for participating and taking the time to join us on this panel.
Thank you, Tom, for hosting.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.